I suggest that we proceed with our panel 4, which is dealing with equality within the Sustainable Development Goals. I have honor and privilege to be on a floor with Madam Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, President of Croatia, 2015-2020, with Madam Ana Birchal, Member of the Parliament and Deputy Prime Minister of Romania, 2018-2019, and Minister of Justice, 2019, and my dear friend, Madam Tkeshelashvili, Deputy Prime Minister of Georgia, 2010-2012. Of course, we have our friends and colleagues who are going to join us via Zoom. Madam Ameenah Gurib-Fakim, President of Mauritius, 2015-2018. Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of Inter-Parliamentary Union and Global Board Member of the International Gender Champions. He will join us via Zoom as well as my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Boris Tadić, President of Serbia, 2014-2012 via Zoom. And last but not the least, with us will be Ms. Kathleen Kraft-Buchman, CEO and founder of Women at the Table and Global Board Member of International Gender Champions. Our panel is devoted to, as we said, equality within sustainable development, and having in mind the reality societies around the world are facing ramping inequalities, especially reducing the SDG 10, which is dealing with attempt to reduce inequality that requires government serious actions. Income, wealth, and social inequalities cannot be addressed without speaking about the particular discrimination among all inequalities and women which suffer the most. The implementation of SDG 5, gender inequality, the transformation of gender norms, and recognition of women's achievements in all sectors require accelerated action by government, civil society, and private sector, and many others. We were just last week together, some of us directly, some of us via Zoom, in a NGIC high-level meeting on the margins of UN General Assembly, where, among other things, we were having an in-depth discussion about Afghanistan-related issues, and we had great meetings with Afghanistan ambassador in UN, and among other things, he raised the issue that is more, unfortunately, in focus of today's whole world, which is related to women of Afghanistan as a symbol of our future journey to gender equality in a much better way than the women of Afghanistan have today. So, having said so, I would like to call to take the floor Madam President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović.
Thank you very much, Zlatko. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, at the beginning of today's second panel, Equality within the Sustainable Development Goals, in the context of our Peace, Diversity, and Our Common Humanity conference, on behalf of all the panelists, I would like to thank the organizers, the NGIC and UN Geneva, for organizing this very timely conference, out of which I believe and hope that we will send not only strong messages, but actual recommendations to the UN Secretary General and the United Nations and all member states with respect to the fulfillment of sustainable development goals and our Agenda 2030. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the concept of security, and most of us actually refer to what Mr. Jacobs mentioned this morning, and that is the concept of human security, which presumes not only the absence of conflict, but really access to healthcare, education, opportunities, jobs, social security, etc. So really a human-centered security. We address the root causes of conflict, the underlying causes, among which inequality, political, economic, and social is the basic one. It is underlined by poverty, by lack of access to resources, education and healthcare, lack of opportunities, the many rifts that we see across societies and between societies today, and that all results or breeds extremism, terrorism, instability, and conflict. We as member states of the UN have defined the Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals in order to address this inequality and to remove not just the root causes of conflict that plague many parts of the world, but really to bring about that level of human security where we see a people-centered economy, social system, and a people-centered future so much needed in times of what we call social distancing, although to me, it really is an ugly word, and I think we should translate it into something that is more space-oriented rather than distancing from each other, because what we will need is in the post-pandemic period to work much closer together to achieve the SDGs. We have definitely been set back by the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, in my capacity of head of state, when I spoke before the United Nations General Assembly, I used to point to the fact that it should not be a self-serving pulpit, but that we should really report on the achievements in achieving the Agenda 2030. Most of us, unfortunately, did not have much to report. And again, as I've said, the situation has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has created deeper rifts in societies and socioeconomic divides and gaps. And this is especially evident in the cross-cutting issues or elements of the SDGs, and that is education and gender equality, SDGs number 4 and 5 respectively. Today, we will be focusing a little bit more on women. So let me address just briefly the effects, the major effects on women and the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has really set us back with respect to achieving gender equality, which is a goal that unfortunately no single country in the world has used or has achieved up to this point. And the pandemic, unfortunately, threatens to undo even the modest progress that was achieved before it. So the major elements of the effects of the pandemic on women have been first and foremost the shadow pandemic on violence against women. And I have to say that it really bothered me during the pandemic that we were not focusing on those issues, that we do not show basic empathy towards women, girls, and all other family members who in the situations of isolation and spending so much time with people who violated them either physically, emotionally, abused them in any sort of way, and that we were not much quicker in devising the mechanisms to protect women and girls and of course other family members from abusers. And during the pandemic, unfortunately, we have seen a sharp rise in violence against women, both in domestic and public settings, and in particular in conflict. Secondly, women were or have been in the forefront of the response to the pandemic as healthcare workers, as workers in different services, and also providers of care in their own families, but also in the care sector as another element that needs to be addressed for members of other families who need assistance. We have also seen rising unemployment in general, but in particular amongst women due to the displacement of workforce and skill shifts that we have seen during the pandemic because of the heavier reliance on technology and because of the fact that we practice distancing and isolation, which further also exacerbated the pay gap between men and women. And of course, the digital gap caused by the access to and the speed of internet, the quality and availability, the number of digital devices, has also had a really marked effect on women in particular. And as the schools closed down, girls were definitely at a disadvantage because oftentimes they did not have access to digital resources, and they were forced to take care of other members of their families. So what needs to be done in the immediate, medium, and long term? Let me just outline about 5 sets of different measures that I believe that we should be implementing in the context, in our national context, and in the context of the United Nations and other international organizations and institutions. First and foremost, it's taking the immediate measures to appoint more women on coordination bodies that different countries and societies have to deal with the effects of the pandemic, to devise the measures to alleviate the effects of the pandemic. We need more gender and socially sensitive policies, and it has been proven that when women are included in government and management positions, they are most socially sensitive, not just towards other women, but to other isolated, marginalized communities and to the social requirements of communities themselves. Secondly, we need to address the shadow pandemic of violence, ensure hotlines, access to hotlines and shelters, protection services, but also get more involved as human beings in recognizing and addressing violence against us. We need to improve healthcare, access to hygiene and housing for a lot of women around the world. Third, and this is certainly a short, medium, and long-term measure, we need to include women in decision-making processes in general, setting targets. In most cases, this means quota for women in leadership and management, and really devising concrete plans how to implement them. Fourth, rebuilding more resilient and greener economies. This, of course, also means gender equal economies, because advancing gender equality is really the smart thing to do for all societies, all countries in the world. Advancing gender equality and gender parity could add trillions of dollars to global growth, as has been estimated by many financial institutions and think tanks. Of course, it has also been proven that economic empowerment of women has a snowball effect, because we see really at work those advantages when women are employed, and when that contributes not just to their self-esteem and their personal positions in society, but really the status and the positions of their families and their communities, be that local, national, or the global community. So some measures in that context could include regulating care work and informal economy. As I've said, women are disproportionately represented in those sectors, and taking care of family members is often not acknowledged and not rewarded. It's taken for granted. It's not considered something to be adding to the benefits of society, but this is really old-fashioned thinking, because women and those who are employed in the care work are actually or not employed but working in the care sector are actually taking on obligations of local communities and society. So we need to reward the currently unpaid work. We need to provide equal access to labor markets, which means designing overall strategies in communities and on the national level. Reskilling, redeployment, in particular in the context of the technological developments and of the skills shift. Ensuring access to technology and job training, but access to education for women in general, in particular emphasis on STEM, which generates work that is of added value, paid positions of added value, and that have traditionally been looked at as male domains. We need to improve pay standards by addressing wage inequality and also, of course, address work conditions that many women work in. In addition, gender responsive financing is another long-term measure, which includes not just targeted assistance from the COVID recovery plans, but also access to financial aid and investment in general, because women, even before the pandemic, had restricted access to financing, to loans, etc. So we need to put emphasis in particular on the development of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Just in the context of what Zlatko mentioned of Afghanistan and the situation in Afghanistan, let me add a small, not a diversion, but a really important area, and that is women in peace and security. And in that context, we shouldn't be looking at women only as victims of conflict and sexual and other violence, but also as agents of change and have them included in the peace processes, because it has been statistically proven that when women are included, that there is much more of a chance for the peace process to succeed in the long term. And finally, a long-term goal that we have been working on and we must put a lot more emphasis on is removing gender stereotypes. We know that stereotype effects can be devastating. They have a detrimental influence on the ambition of girls on their future careers, because the effect of the stereotype is such that girls fear that they will be the living proof of the truth of that stereotype. So in doing all of this and setting out this full and 5 sets of measures, and of course there are many more, however, we don't have the time to discuss all that today, gendering legislation and policies, and most importantly, implementation is of utmost values. We have to keep our focus on gender equitable responses when we talk not just about dealing with the effects of the pandemic, but really when we readdress the sustainable development goals and when we reset the targets to accelerate progress in order to be able to get even close to achieving them by the year 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Now I hope that everything is ready to have our dear friend, NGIC member, President Mauritius, 2015-2018, dear friend Ameenah Gurib-Fakim. I won't say the floor is yours, but Ameenah, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Zlatko. To all the participants, all the delegates, good afternoon. Thank you. I think the previous speaker, our dear friend Kolinda, has spelled out quite a few points that I think I will just compliment on, because I don't want to repeat what she has said. She has said it very eloquently. Just 2 points I would like just to raise is we have talked about women's rights and everything that she has touched on in terms of access, education, health. But I think we have to go one step back. In many parts of the world, having a life is an issue. And we have seen how in many countries, female feticide is on the rise for many reasons, stereotype, cultural values, and all the rest of it. This is something that has to be addressed, and so much so that one Nobel Prize winner, Amartya Sen, he wrote a paper, a seminal paper, where he asked a question: where are the 100 million women? Of course, he was referring to his country of India, but we know that in many parts of the world, female feticide is an issue. So we have to encourage the girl child to be born in the first place. And then when she's born, what are her opportunities? How do we value her potential? How does she have access to education? Because again, we have seen, unfortunately, right now in Afghanistan, we are rolling back some of the gains made over the past 20, 25 years, where we hope that this will be again relooked at under a better framework of granting that girl child an opportunity for an education. And we know that in many parts of my continent, Africa, the issue is still there in terms of stereotype, in terms of structures, and how do we encourage How do we encourage her by providing her with the right role model so that she can really live up to her true potential? And of course, as Kolinda has rightly said, by having her empowered, by removing all the kind of restrictions on her, how much she can add to the economy of respective countries. So these are some of the issues that are very, very relevant for the emergence of our country, of our economies also post-COVID. But there's something that I think Kolinda has also mentioned, and I will again reiterate this, is violence against women. And this is something that we have seen really on the rise. It has been exponential almost over the past year and a half during the COVID era. And this is something that I think has to be brought on the table now that hopefully we're seeing COVID behind, how to address this issue of female violence. And we have seen that really in its bare realities, really crude, to see these women who have been the object of so much violence over the past few months. So this makes me wonder, makes us wonder, what are the gains, real gains that women have made after CEDAW? And unfortunately, I think if you go back at the figures and the statistics, we'll find that many of the gains have been rolled out. There is one more issue that has been also been quite glaring over the past few months, is women in media, women in cyberspace. And I think this has now become the last frontier for the demonization of women in that space. And we have seen also that we know now we are living in an information age, and media, newspapers, magazine, and other cyberspace, they are playing an even more pervasive role in our lives, and much more so than ever before. And we have seen how media is also playing a very aggressive role in shaping events, opinion, mass communication, and shape the views more than ever, and sometimes set the agenda for what the public thinks about. And I think that media is not only transmitting information and knowledge, but also it is reinforcing significantly or even altering existing belief and influencing opinion and cultivate a perception of social reality which may not be there. So what we have to really look at now is this space where women are being demonized more and more. So I think while it can have a downside, but I think the media can also help transmit values and cultures, just like leaders used to do in the past. So mass communication and social media, we know they're playing very important role and influence in determining what issues are important. And I think this is where we need to see how we can decontextualize statistics. And also, we can also bring in so much more changes that we can actually afford to bring, because when the media can reach the national, international events in our own living room. So it is a powerful tool that we have to use, and also ensure that there is a lot of sensitivity about how media is being treated, how the image is being treated. And also, unfortunately, in the media, we find that women very often they describe as strident, aggressive, and also through culture, careful picture selection and picture editing. So the focus on how women are represented, I think this also matters a lot. So we have to use that space to ensure that a more congenial picture of the women is being brought across. So this is, I think, the next frontier that we have to cope with in order to change the image that women are having. And if we want a better and less violent societies towards women, we really need to shape the narrative, shape the discussion around cyberspace. And I think this also, the tool can be used also to facilitate and make things easier, not just to remove the stereotype, but also to build a much more positive and progressive image of women and their contribution. And fortunately, we know that the society in which we live in, it tends to actually portray, and in fact, it practice a lot of misogyny. So this is what we'll have to construct, a new image going through the lens, through the prism of the local and of course international media. So I'll stop here, and hopefully there'll be a opportunity for discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I will skip any comments as an excellent moderator of this panel before this one, in order to let's say save the time. So maybe on the end I will use some reflections of what is greatly said before and hoping to continue. And in that respect, I'm calling Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of Inter-Parliamentary Union and Global Board Member of International Gender Champions, to take a screen, get zoomed with us in here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be part of this conversation, especially so as it's taking place in the context of a major crisis facing the global community today, the COVID-19 pandemic. As has been said abundantly, this pandemic is posing a major challenge and is jeopardizing all the success or progress that we have made over recent years in order to move the world to better climes. I take the floor here because I want to make a point about gender equality, and gender equality being an issue of human rights. We need to look at how we engage women and men together in various aspects of our work. I think that President Grabar-Kitarović mentioned it very well when she referred to the contribution that women in leadership positions bring to the table when they are given the opportunity to improve upon governance and resilient societies. But then when we look at various assessments in the world, we are all agreed that discriminatory laws still affect more than 2.5 billion women and girls worldwide. And so it's no surprise, again, as President Grabar mentioned, there is no surprise that the ongoing pandemic has exacerbating existing gender equalities or inequalities. And so we need to do something about this if we do not want to, we want to ensure sustainable green growth, as has been mentioned. We need to build forward, but in building forward, we must build equal. As leaders, we cannot shy away from our own responsibility to deliver a gender transformative agenda, and we need to be held accountable for that. I think that it is important that as we preach gender equality, as we identify what it is that can be done to promote gender equality, we should be seen also to be practicing gender equality. We should be seen to be walking the talk. And that is why I appreciate these conversations involving various stakeholders at this table. And that is why I am pleased to share membership of the International Gender Champions with my colleague Caitlin, who is on this panel here. It is an initiative that spreads over some 6 multilateral hubs and brings together close to 300 international leaders dedicated to promoting gender equality in their spheres of operation. For us, we think that democracy cannot be genuine if you don't have women at the table. If we do not have women and girls being part of the conversation, either as actors or as beneficiaries of the discussions that we are taking here, we are having. And if you allow me, I am going to say a number of things that I believe we should be taking into account as we move forward in prosecuting gender equality. And this is based on our own experience at the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the Global Organization of Parliaments. I think the first thing we need to do, as I was intimating earlier, is that we have to make our institutions gender sensitive. This means that our institutions in their policies and practices, as well as mechanisms, should be seen to be addressing in equal measure the interests of men and women. We know that parliaments, for instance, are key to promoting laws and budgets that are gender transformative. So we need to make sure that parliaments are not only promoting those laws and budgets, but are also seen to be institutions that are sensitive to women's interests. And that is why it is very important, and we are very keen to be working with the CEDAW committee in order to address discriminatory practices in law in the various countries around the world. We need to look at our institutions and see how the working modalities discriminate or do not discriminate against women. We need to look at, first of all, reviewing all the legislation, the laws and legislative framework that we have in place to identify shortcomings, to identify gaps that they need to be reformed. So you have review and reform of legal frameworks, which is very important. And let me go back again to what the president of Croatia was saying earlier on, and that is we need to address the key issue of violence against women, which has now been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. When we do studies, we see that not only has there been a rise in this phenomenon, but there has been a rise among a certain category of leaders. Today, it is clear that gender-based violence is a serious impediment to women's political empowerment, because we have evidence that 4 out of 5 women politicians or parliamentarians have faced one form of sexism or sexual violence or the other. So if we need to achieve gender equality, we need to be addressing in a very robust manner the issue of gender-based violence. And I'm very pleased to be part of that movement that is intended to promote efforts in eliminating gender-based violence. It is also one of the pledges that we as international gender champions have undertaken to ensure that there is zero tolerance when it comes to violence against women, including in politics. I want to go back to the issue of gender equality. And when we talk about gender equality in terms of gender parity, in terms of women's political empowerment, we are talking not only of numbers, we are not talking solely of the number of women going into parliament, for instance. We are also talking about the opportunities that are provided to women when they accede to parliament. They should be given those opportunities. Conditions should be created so that they can contribute effectively to parliamentary processes. And when we talk of bringing more women into parliaments, we need, again, in this day and age, to adopt special measures. As I speak, I have just read an article this morning where, for the first time, elections to parliament have taken place in the state of Qatar, but no woman has been elected to that parliament. And so we would have now to, or rather, Qatar will now have to rely on the goodwill of the emir to appoint a number of women to sit in parliament if we want to make sure that women are at the table. So I think that we need to recognize this fact and continue to work and adopt special measures that would make sure that women are at the table, whether we're talking of quotas or reserved seats for women. We should not shy away from taking those measures. And let me also say a few words about multi-stakeholder partnerships. This is not, as when we're talking of gender equality, it's not just for governments, it's not just for the international community. We should be engaging effectively with civil society, whether they are playing the role of watchdog or actually providing technical support for the advancement of women. We need to be working together to create those synergies that are friendly to gender equality. I would like just to conclude at this stage by saying that what I have just mentioned is not just preaching to you, and I believe we are preaching to the converted here, but we in the IPU have done a number of things that we want to use as good practice for walking the talk. For instance, within our midst, we have created a system of sanctions and incentives for gender equality. For instance, if delegations come to the IPU without them being composed of men and women, they lose part of their voting rights, they lose part of their entitlements within the organization. And if they include men and women, including young people, they have more entitlements as prescribed by the statutes of the organization. And that is why we see, for instance, that 40% of those participating in our governing bodies are women. This has not been something that has been done by chance. It is something that we have done intentionally and deliberately to make sure that women are at the table. And the second example is what we do with those resolutions and decisions that we take. In the IPU, decisions cannot be taken without the prior views and opinions of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, which is a statutory structure that is there to make sure that the IPU's processes are gender sensitive. So we want to be seen to be walking the talk in order to promote gender equality, in order to promote a spirit of emulation, which is very important in this particular area of our work. And so I just thought I should put this on the table as a contribution to these discussions to say, again, and I agree with President Grabar-Kitarović that the COVID pandemic challenges us to be more robust in our response when it comes to promoting gender equality if we want a world that is equitable, fair, and just for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chungong, for your wise words. Mission Control is calling Apollo astronaut Boris Tadić, President of Serbia. I hope, Boris, you are online. He is? And Mission Control, please, Boris. Take a screen from Serbia.
Thank you, Zlatko. Thank you, everyone. This is a really great honor that I have opportunity to participate on this conference and this very important topic that we have to discuss right now, especially having in mind that we are facing with the many challenges nowadays. But whenever human societies are facing with that global challenges, the most vulnerable population is going to be even more affected. The women, kids, and the people that are affected by poverty are in a very difficult situation, having in mind pandemic, the wars, and the security challenges the global communities are facing with everywhere. One of the most important issues is the gender issue and the position of the woman in the society nowadays. That issue is very much in focus of the global community after what happened in Afghanistan. And we know that there are significant challenges regarding position of the woman population, and everyone is very much focused on further development in this country. But having in mind the fact that Afghanistan is a central country in Central Asia, having impact in all other countries, we have to be very much concerned about current situation, especially if we are remembering what happened under Taliban's regime in Afghanistan many years ago, and also having in the mind the ideology and the religious approach. I'm not going to cover all issues that are perfectly covered by previous speakers. I would like only to emphasize some aspects of this topic that we didn't cover until now. My science can be very helpful in terms of that issues we are talking about. This is psychology, and I'm suggesting that maybe even United Nations can invest more about scientific researches regarding psychology and expectations in terms of behavior in a high risk situation we are facing with. This is about gender issue. This is about population of kids, of the young people, and this is about behavior and that we can predict of different social groups. I'm not sure that we are focused enough on such researches that can be very, very helpful regarding current situation. In that respect, I am suggesting to such scientific researches to be taken into the account very seriously, and specifically because of prevention of the very negative impact regarding many challenges nowadays we are facing with. Second, I would like to emphasize the importance of prevention. And to be very frank, I never understood why United Nations didn't invest more energy and focusing on prevention of the conflicts, on the problems. Also, the main approach to the challenges in a global community is a reaction after everything what happened. But prevention can be more effective, more cheap, can be more efficient and more rational. Like always in the health industry, in the medical sector. And I think that this model we can implement in political terms in United Nations in many aspects nowadays. One issue which is sometimes ignored by international community, but can be very important in terms of the global development goals, and which is also creating huge impact on their goals, is the issue of organized crime. Issue of organized crime is specifically enhanced in terms of current situation in the very sensitive area all around the world. I think Afghanistan is one of the very important issues. Latin America, whenever we are facing with the increasing of organized crime, gender issue is a very difficult situation, and the rights for all vulnerable populations and the groups in that respect. I'm emphasizing issue of organized crime, fighting organized crime right now as one of the most important topic that we have to be focused on nowadays, specifically after political crisis we have in Afghanistan. I'm not saying that during the intervention of the international troops in Afghanistan we didn't have such problem. Somehow that problem was also increased during the intervention of international troops there. But I think that we can handle issue of organized crime if we are creating really significant reforms in agricultural sector in Latin America and Central Asia. But we are not investing in much in that kind of prevention nowadays. Organized crime is specifically affecting gender issue. Organized crime is putting into very difficult situation those kind of populations always, and this is something that we have to emphasize as soon as possible. And this is also arena in which we can achieve really a lot. Unfortunately, in past few decades, I didn't see significant actions of the global community, even United Nations, in terms of prevention of increasing organized crime. As I said, mainly in Latin America and Central Asia, the areas where we have a huge problem in terms of production of heroin and cocaine, which is mainly affecting the different continents and creating unsustainable situation in terms of prevention of conflicts, and also affecting very much sustainable development goals, Agenda 2030. Those issues I would like to, I was intending to emphasize right now and to be taken into the consideration, because I think this is very important in terms of prevention of conflicts and prevention of all negative impacts on gender issue and the vulnerable groups that are very much affected in the crisis nowadays. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Boris, for underlying especially issue of prevention as maybe one of the core problems and core potential solutions for a lot of things that we've been talking about, especially in context of creating some kind of new multilateralism as a part of new normal. Having said so, I would like now, from taking the screen, ask Ms. Ana Birchel, Member of the Parliament and dear friend, Deputy Prime Minister of Romania from 2018 to 2019, to take a floor this time. Please, Ana.
Thank you very, very much. And before saying a few words about this very important and very generous topic, please firstly allow me to say how grateful I am that we could meet in person after a difficult period. And I don't know where is Roshan, but I should say a huge thank you to him and his team, because you know, we didn't publicize it that much as it should have. That, for example, in Romania at the beginning of the pandemic, when we had serious troubles, including getting the masks, Roshan immediately got in touch with me, and he kindly sent some masks that I provided to women and some elderly people that were making, quite frankly, the difference between life and death. So a huge thank you to this great family, a great thank you and huge thank you to our co-chairs. I have to say that what best example should we have about talking about, talking about this important issue when we have such a great moderator. Over the years, I've been sitting in panels dealing with the equal opportunity, which I have to confess is a very dear topic to my heart. While since entering public life, I was more focused on foreign affairs, European affairs, justice, but equal opportunities were very dear to my heart because as a member of the parliament, my first piece of legislation was actually the equal opportunity law. It was drafted by the main NGOs in Romania with international help, and I assume it as a newly elected member of the parliament. And in that piece of legislation, which was passed and it's enacted now, but it was quite revolutionary from the Romanian point of view, but quite frankly, from the European point of view. It was during the year of 2011, 2012, where in that piece of legislation, we provided as a law to have equal pay for equal work. And we established other principles that our distinguished colleagues were talking earlier about, preventing the violence, ending the disparities, and practically give a better chance from the law point of view of the equal opportunities. So coming back to this point, I'm very happy that we heard our friends and colleagues, male friends, and a great moderator talking about those issues, because usually you will hear just the women talking about the equal opportunities. So by having this balance, I think it's a great example as well. So I was very happy to learn that the UN Secretary General has made gender equality one of his top priorities and called it the world's greatest human rights challenge. And it's right. And when I was, fighting to get this piece of legislation passed through the parliament, and it was quite a challenge, to be honest with you. And if I have a moment, I can explain it how I actually managed my colleagues to pass it. I looked at their colleges, and guess what? The majority of the voters were women. So I was going one-to-one and saying, if you are not passing this piece of legislation, I will make sure that I will go to your college and I make clear that you were against this piece of legislation. And I'm not so sure if the women voters will vote for you next time around. So that was something that probably it's now is public knowledge, and it was public knowledge in Romania, but it was a good tactic to get this piece of legislation. As I said, it was a good base for the law. Another great project that I was intimately involved in, I was the appointed member of the parliament for the European Council for the Istanbul Convention. And I'm very happy to say that we've been working very closely. Romania was one of the drafters of the Istanbul Convention, and we ratified it, we signed it. And it was during my mandate that we put it in action. And as we were talking earlier about hearing from our panelists about the violence, yes, violence against women, it's a serious threat, but it's not just the physical violence. Many times we forget about the emotional violence, the economic violence, all those type of violence that needs to be addressed, not just from the law point of view, but from the mentalities. And here the education is the key. And women, when you look at the studies, women were the first victims of the economic and the financial crisis when we were looking, in the past crisis. And I don't want to get a huge guess here, but I'm not so sure that I am far away from the truth that with this pandemic, women are the first victims as well, or the main victims as well. And here I am expecting from the world leaders to put in place, and from each of us to put in place the policies to address this issue, because you will continue to have the discrimination from the salary point of view. Yes, we have it in the law, the equal pay for equal work, but the law is not enough. It's a great foundation, but if it's not implemented, it's just a beautiful piece of legislation. So I guess, setting up the mechanism where you will address those fundamental issues, because the equal opportunity, it is a fundamental human right. It is a democratic right, as it is intimately related to the, to the basic human rights. It is an economic issue, as it is a motor for the growth and for the modernization. So equal opportunity is not just a concept somewhere floating in the air. It is practically involved in every single aspect of our daily life. So it's a democratic issue, it is an economic issue, and it is a social issue as well. Because the way a society is dealing with the equal opportunities, it's practically a mirror, it's a reflection of the way that society is. It's practically the mirror of the democratic values and the respect for the democracy, the responsibility of that society. I heard and I subscribe to all the great things that were said earlier, and I'm not going to repeat them, but I would like just to emphasize the need for the education and the need for the models, the real models. In terms of the education, we need to start eliminating, including the stereotypes from early on. You still find in certain books just certain tasks for the girls and certain tasks for the boys. And I don't think that's the right approach to start in life. Then bullying, it's a serious factor. A lot of young girls are confronted with the bullying, being at school or being in the society. And again, I don't think, people are understanding the damages that are being done in terms of taking that self-esteem out or the trust away, especially as a young girl. So that's a form of serious violence that should be addressed in my view. Obviously, changing the mentalities, it's a continuing fight. And we will be able to win that fight. Well, I guess it's up to us every single day by speaking out, by looking up to the role models. I do find it sometimes frustrating looking back that not that many women are promoting women, if we want to speak very frankly about it. I don't know why is that. but it is a reality. And that needs to be addressed, especially, I guess, young girls, young women are looking up to the successful politicians, if we are talking from the political life point of view, because not that many, the question is, how are you convincing women to enter public service, to enter politics at the local and national level? And that's a serious challenge, especially as Martin was saying earlier, from the parliamentary point of view. Yes, we can impose quotas, we can address lots of things from the law point of view. And believe me, as a lawyer, the first instinct is always going to the law. But yes, we do have, we need to have the legislation, but if we are not enacting that type of legislation in a constructive way, it's just a legislation lost in the process as many others. So yes, it is a continuing fight. Yes, I'm sure that we will win it sooner or later. We have important steps, but yet when you look at what's happening in Afghanistan, and I was intimately involved in getting some women judges out of Afghanistan, and I'm not going to elaborate in this format you understand the reasons why, but we partner and we fought very hard and we managed with great success, but it was until the last minute with a lot of emotions we will be able to succeed it. And I'm very happy to report that Romania managed to do that with great success. But my lesson is we should have not been in that position from the very beginning. As the president of Serbia was talking earlier about prevention, and he was talking about organized crime. Well, at my time as a Minister of Justice, I witnessed the organized crime and the human trafficking of women and girls, and how is that a business, an ugly business, but quite a profitable business for those people, and the damages that are being done for the society and for the future. Talking, not just for the individual girls, it's so beyond words, and the pain. I spoke with a couple of those girls, and you can't express in words what they feel and how they feel. And as a society, I think we owe it, and as an international community, we owe this ugly stuff not to happen. And as we are in Geneva, and we have the great support of the United Nations office in Geneva, and I think they are doing quite a very good work in terms of the policies that they are promoting. I think, sometimes 2 + 2 can make 5 if we all join efforts in this common fight. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that needs to be addressed. To summarize, the laws are important, but they are not enough. I think one of the most important actions that we must take is to have that coordinated effort of public communication that targets the vulnerable categories, especially women, and from very early on, as I said, and just to communicate and educate. I think the key is the education from every single aspect. I mean, and as we are celebrating today the International Day of Education, I think it couldn't be a better way of celebrating it by addressing the policies that needs to be done in order to fight the inequalities and practically to promote the equality as being one of the very fundamental rights, human rights. So in the end, if I have to sum it up to a few words, I think it's changing the mentalities, promoting the models, and actually the education should be the foundation, along with the personal responsibility and social responsibility and international responsibility that we have to fight to close the gaps between gender inequalities. And with that in mind, I will end. And if there are any other questions, I will be very happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And of course, you made a lot of new questions and pointers to what we should go on. But in order to have more from today's session, I call my dear friend Tkeshelashvili to take a floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to echo what Anna already mentioned when it comes to expressing my pleasure of seeing you in person, all of you, and then all of us attending today the event. It has been a while that at least I personally had no pleasure of seeing you in person, and then having a possibility of addressing audience in person as well. It's quite a bit of a difference compared to the Zooming and all the great achievements in technology that we have in terms of communication, but in person contact, at least for my generation, I still to think. Not to repeat perhaps very important points that have been mentioned by the previous speakers, I would just build from what already has been said and perhaps would hope to add some few pointers in addition to that or as a complement to it. I'll start with a bit of a personal story, perhaps, when it comes to the role of women and then the experiences that I had to go through my own lifetime, perhaps while observing a lot of women as the role models. Georgia, my country of origin, has went through many times of crisis, not only historically, but in the recent history as well. Wars, economic crisis of different magnitude. And what I can say, and it's not with any disrespect to our dear friends here who are not female by gender, at least in my experience, what I've seen that in times of crisis, women proved to be much stronger somehow in weathering their families through the times of crisis. I wanted to highlight that message because we frequently hear, rightfully so, that women are, as representatives of vulnerable groups, victims much more of the times of crisis. And that is true when we speak about conflict, crisis, economic, or any other like COVID, that exacerbates what makes women belonging to vulnerable groups sort of as well-founded. But at the same time, what we've seen, what I've seen, at least in my lifetime, the courage, flexibility to adjust to unknowns in their lifetime, especially I remember when Soviet Union collapsed, which was the great victory for our country at the time to regain the freedom, but economically it was a collapse at the time. And all the social contracts with the state has collapsed at the time too. So something new was emerging, but it was not yet there. It was extremely chaotic times, very hopeful, but very chaotic. Women were the bedrock, so to say, for many families at that time to start small businesses, entrepreneurial activities, and all the feelings that men had with entitlement, so to say, with their lives, established lives, that collapsed and they were at disarray. So women chipped in, so to say, and they managed to get their families through these difficult times. And in the war times as well, with all the difficulties that they had to go through, they maintained the stability of their kids, their families. And at that time, when men were fighting, I would say, women were the ones who maintained the stability as much as it could have been maintained for their families. So one message that I wanted to highlight as a summary of that story is that women are very strong and women can weather a lot when it comes to the crisis and challenges that can come against them. And then what makes them even stronger in the future. So I would want to put that message to all the young girls as well, that we are not victims per se. We are not only equals to male, but we could be even stronger at times. So be ambitious, and then we need to be ambitious and enthusiastic about that, and not to think about gender from a critical point of view when it comes to not to be a victim, but rather how we could empower women more, and young girls particularly. When it comes to education, to add perhaps a little bit of that, which is linked to stereotypes. What are the professions that girls mostly choose? How that stereotypes are built already at school, even at the kindergarten levels, and what is even worse, by families themselves. What I can tell from my personal experience as well is that the greatest thing that my parents did to me, I would say, and I'm eternally grateful to my father for that as well, even more than to my mother, is that I never had a gender in my mindset as a factor. I never thought of it as a factor that I should have been aware of. Equality of me and my brother was a given. It was not even discussed. It was just the natural thing, and the open possibilities that were given to us in terms of freedom of choices that we've had on anything were completely equal. So in that sense, I guess the primary responsibility starts with us as parents and any families that we speak about, because when we speak about the greatest forms of oppression right now against women, not only on the legal standpoint, but then in practical terms, these are the families that themselves accept the fact or even promote the facts how women are treated on an equal basis. We still have almost 40 countries, if I'm not mistaken, where inheritance rights of boys and girls are even different. So even at that level, parents are okay themselves that their inheritance rights, not only by legal terms, but by de facto terms as well, should be different. And there were even more horrendous examples, obviously, mentioned today in terms of how some women are not burned even because they are fetuses, women rather than girls, rather than boys in this case. So when we speak about transformation of mentality, attitudes, education is key. And then, but beyond that, it's the families themselves and how the upbringing starts with the families. But the role of a state and leadership at the global and local level obviously is an important factor, because transformative effect can never be as deep as it should be if it is not helped and assisted. And in this case, women who are already mothers, and then young girls who don't have yet families, but then will have children in the future, they have to be empowered in the way that they feel stronger by bringing that mentality to their children. And then even more so needs to be done by male representatives, by fathers in this case, for example, who speak about the families, because that what imprints this confidence and sense of equality, which is a given human right of any human being, rather than something that you have to fight for. Beyond education and then sort of the professions in the education, I wanted to highlight access to the technological developments as well, because that is it has two pitfalls in it. One is an inequality when it comes to wealth inequality, which even is harder than for female representatives and young females to have access to technological advancements that gets them better educational opportunities or better entrepreneurial opportunities in this case. So if that could be helped with in such a ways that there could be more potential in sciences, in access to the technologies of the kind that could make modern types of entrepreneurial activities accessible to creativity of females, that could be a strong contribution to economic development, growth, but then equality, so to say, between the genders as well. One thing that always bothers me in this case when I think about equality of genders is that how to narrate that story and how to target the message in such a ways that is friendly and accessible to all genders. Because if we're honest about it, especially during the hard times, I can understand why, for example, our male friends, colleagues, or relatives, whoever, could feel that, why is it that, especially in the countries where we don't have specific oppression, so to say, against women, right? Which is easier for everybody to understand when it comes to either legal inequalities per se or security-related issues. Violence, unfortunately, is widespread everywhere. But in democratic countries, let's put it that way, when fundamentals are more or less at place, when male representatives struggle a lot in their lifetime to provide food for their families. It's not that their life is easy. So when the message comes across that women need to be supported, women need to have more opportunities, more access to technological advancement, finances, credit, so on and so forth, then the question arises, why, right? So that because we do have those problems as well, why we are not assisted perhaps in a specific way, or should we not? And then the answer to that is difficult, but I guess one thing that I could say is that key to that answer is that when we speak about equality, we really speak about equality of arms when it comes to level play field. I believe strongly in market economy. I believe in competitiveness when it comes to jobs, when it comes to political careers, anything. You need to make of your own destiny, right? In this case, and then you need to put efforts into it. What we talk here is play field that needs to be a level play field, so that there are no inequalities that provide more opportunities because of a legacy of history that be, or the facto situation of economic structures in the way that they're developed institutionally or by culture in economic institutions or public institutions that provide more opportunities de facto, if not legally, to men rather than female in this case. And then there are social aspects obviously into that as well, but then there are financial as well. And here, I guess we reach this difficult point why female representatives could have of our societies something more to help them to have startups in terms of economic activities, entrepreneurial activities. Because as it happens, so access to liquidity of finances, it's a historical legacy, is more accumulated in the institutions in such a ways that male have more access to it or have had, so to say, for some time. And then in that sense, to level that play field, something as a help could be needed for female in such a ways that they overcome the stereotypes of their families that be or societies that yes, you can have a tech startup, you can have a nice IT company, you can have a, I don't know, business, new idea in businesses on anything that you might be creative and capable to do so. It just, you might need to have an access to the funds, so to say, to do that. So in that case, if there is a bit more that is provided in the societies where women traditionally had less access to, that empowerment could be very meaningful in this case. And I'll end up with one interesting dimension that is developing quite a bit now in the development world right now. I myself now work in Ukraine as a head of anti-corruption program funded by the USAID, by the US government. And there is a lot of thinking and efforts now put into this question on how to mainstream gender equality in programming development aid projects and programs. And in the beginning, you think that it's a self-obvious thing. We all try to do it. So do we need to put more efforts into it? But when you dig deeper, there is so much that can be done in a meaningful way in this direction, starting from the way how nuanced and understanding for any given country should be, what the gender equality is in that country particularly, and what are the root causes of that. And you have an analysis and understanding of that before having a tailor-made approach of how to help with mainstreaming gender equality in that particular country, so that we overcome it's not the lazy approach, but an easier at least approach of taking up something that is already developed for a global scene, so to say, and then trying to implementing that in a particular country. But we are all so different, and that's the beauty of our planet, so to say. Every society differs, problems, but opportunities obviously differ as well. So for us to have that well tailored, we need to have a nuanced understanding, I would believe, for every country. What are the root causes of equality, again, in that particular country, and how to address those inequalities in the way that not only special projects or programs that are designed for gender equality could deal with those issues, but rather that is mainstreamed in cross-sectorally when it comes to development aid. And if we can see how much efforts, resources, and money are put in the development activities for the good causes that they are there, it's an enormous resource that could be used much more effectively to ensure that if there is a project that helps in any given country with competitiveness in economy, how gender equality is mainstreamed in that project as well, so that it is attuned to that issue as well. My own project, which deals with anti-corruption issues, has very significant elements related to gender equality mainstreaming aspects as well, so that we see how the problem that we've observed, for example, that whistleblowing system, when it is being developed, it has been proven by the research that while female obviously do care about corruption and want to fight corruption, they are less proactive in doing so. They feel more vulnerable to speak up and to do anything about it. So one of the conclusions of that is that there needs to be special measures how to create more conducive environment for them, so that they are more confident that there will be no repercussions on them, especially if it's extortion related issues, sex related, for example, like sexual extortion as well, or anything related with the education for their kids, for example, at schools or educational institutions, or for them not to lose the jobs if they speak up and do anything. So how even the workers in the special institutions who deal with whistleblowers, for example, need to have special approach to women when they talk with them and then get information. These are nuanced approaches, but in real life, they bring difference, because that's how step by step, ultimately the change could be made. And final thesis, so to say, that I wanted to promote is that the beauty, I guess, of SDGs is that they are not standalone goals in different directions. They're so much interlinked and interrelated that now again, piecemeal approach could work in any single direction. And then with the gender equality related issues, if the SDGs related to peace and rule of law and institutional development and strength is not achieved, there will be no gender equality in any society. If the quality education goal is not achieved, it's very hard to see how that could be achieved. Health, for example, social security. So in other words, as much as the mainstreaming of gender equality is well understood as part of implementation of all other SDGs, the same goes, for example, with the, again, rule of law and peace and security related goal as well, is something that will deliver more impact. And at the end, I would end once again with what I started, I believe, is that I guess it's time already with acknowledging, with due acknowledgement to the problems in a much harder way that women in many places globally face that I ever had to myself in my lifetime, but still to remember that we don't speak about weak gender. We don't speak about the gender that needs to be somehow protected because it's fragile. We speak about the gender that is extremely powerful and strong, which has maintained continuity and evolution of our human race throughout these centuries by being integral, not only part of the society, but the foundation to so many things, especially to the families in this case. And we do have the capacity of being powerful, equal, not superior, obviously, but equal gender to our future in this case. And in that way, I would only hope that in the future we will speak about empowerment more rather than protection as a need. And with that, we'll have more opportunities in such a ways that around the globe, most of the young girls and children will have a very little understanding to what inequality even means. I'm very happy that so far my two girls, my kids, have that kind of lack of full understanding with their own experience of what it is. It's a great joy and pleasure for me to have, but I understand how many don't. So my only hope and wish would be that forgetfulness of what equality is will come in due time, and it's more shorter period of time rather than a long-term goal that we could face. And I hope that it's not a wishful thinking, but something that is achievable with common efforts from all of us in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Eka. And now I'm calling, hope everything functions perfectly with technology. I mean, I hope I won't curse us because this is going so smoothly. I'm calling you Madam Kathleen Kraft-Buchman, CEO and founder of Women at the Table and global board member of International Gender Champions, to Zoom us and take a screen.
And here I am. I hope it's working perfectly. I see myself on the screen, so I believe it is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm incredibly honored to be on this panel with such illustrious and thoughtful people with such great interventions, and also to be the only member of civil society invited. Although the same way that we believe there should be equality among genders, we also often hope for equality of civil society representatives along with government representatives when we speak, because of course governments represent us as civil society. So there's so much extraordinary stuff that already has been said. I'm really here to complement and perhaps to sort of add, I hope, the next layer and the next level to what you've dealt with. You talked about focus of women in the digital space. My dear friend, Martin Chungong, the only person I know on this panel, but a person I admire so deeply and greatly, who talked about building forward, building equal. We heard about the advancement in tech, mainstreaming, research models, and that brings us to the work, I think, of Women at the Table that I share with you now, and the work of the A+ Alliance. So we work using the prism of technology and innovation, and now artificial intelligence, to look for leverage points of change in the economy, in democratic governance, in sustainability, and of course, in technology. And as many of my civil society brothers and sisters do, who look at current and hideous injustice to fight them, our work at Women at the Table and A+ Alliance is to look forward to the next century and to see how in this moment when we're digitizing government services and how we're how can we create new models, and how can we use this moment to change the way that we've traditionally done business. So what we've been seeing is, of course, governments are going from the analog to the digital, but this is a moment, instead of just taking what you've already been doing and then just making it, digitizing it, sort of going from Excel to AI, what you can do is you can look at building a new model and a new way of providing services and allocations. Those could be things from rethinking pensions, conditional cash transfers, scholarships, housing lotteries, healthcare provision. The list goes on and on. We talk about different ways that we can use technology to rethink these things. So our work is particularly focused on what kinds of new models can be created, which we believe we need to do in partnership with the public sector, because it is the public sector that has the responsibility, but also the power to lead us forward in this, and has many mechanisms to do this, including through gender responsive procurement. It is our great belief that gender responsive procurement policies could actually help create an entire new industry in any country, because it would privilege women and feminists, that would be men who believe in equality as well, to be creating new tech that actually works for the betterment of people. So it's not only better pizza apps or the new Facebook, but it really would be, how do we create technology that serves the needs of people, that delivers better quality of life, and helps us combat a lot of the very, very inbred things that we all live with in every country, such as violence against women and gender-based violence. So I won't go into some of the horror stories, although I need for you to recognize that what's happening is that most technology is built on old models. So we have things like recruitment algorithms that consciously or unconsciously wind up just recruiting exactly the same people that have been recruited always into the same kinds of jobs. The classic example being Amazon's algorithm, which looked for the highest performers in their company because they wanted actually to have more women. But the machine saw a pattern, and the pattern was that white men who graduated in engineering from Stanford, who were athletes, were the best fit for the jobs. And the machine taught itself to throw women out of the queue completely, even though the word women had never been mentioned, positively or negatively. But it saw that women were absent and therefore erased them from the possibilities of having those jobs. We also see in a recent credit card that was developed, again, I'm sure with the best intentions, where men and women with the exact same tax returns, this was in the US, in the exact same credit ratings, the men were given 10 times more credit than their wives. And these were all tech entrepreneurs that had kind of discovered this. So there's something in the systems, the old systems that we have that recognizes machine learning, which learns from the bias in the real world. The machine learns from the human bias, where by just merely saying that learning about technology or making more technology is going to get us out of our current crises isn't really sophisticated enough. And what we need to do is we need to sort of create new models. We need to understand that the old data that we're dealing with is biased on many levels, primarily against women, but really from anybody that's been left out of the system who's situationally vulnerable. And we need to make new systems that aren't just unbiased, but actually bring us to building back better, to build to this new equal world that we now have to construct post-COVID. So everyone went on a little over time, so I think I'll stop there, but I would give an open invitation to those of you who are working in any form of government service that we'd love to have conversations with you to talk about what some of this new modeling might be. We work with technologists, academics, and feminists who are mathematicians, machine learning specialists, but also social scientists to think about these issues. And we're very excited and honored to be embarking on some of these experiments with municipalities in particular. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Of course, just to make a very clear reference, Kathleen, you are not the only star from civil society. NGIC represents civil society in the broadest meaning of that sense. And so we are here, most of us on this panel, we have 2 members of the parliament, current sitting members of the parliament, but all of us are basically speaking here as a civil society promoters that are representing ourselves and no one else but ourselves, first of all and after all. So in that case, we are equal, especially since we're talking so much about inequality. And I think that we've been all equal in these 2 days. And without pretending to make any final remarks, since we are leaking out of time, I just made it here in drawing. I mean, how we were connecting each other, how we were connecting. I made a little drawing about what you were saying and who connected to whom. And I mean, it looks like you all connected to each other. I mean, it's so many things that were basically speaking, aligning what we're saying in this extraordinary panel for me. And I learned a lot. I put a lot of notes, and in the end, I mean, if I missed maybe something, so there's more interactions, more interrelations in between what you were saying. I mean, it's not that Anna 3 times mentions education rightly, but 3 or 4 of panelists were underlying the issue of education and inequalities that are dealing with it. Especially, it's really amazing how Kolinda and Boris were aligning when they were talking about the root causes of the conflict of actually hitting the inequality. We had some questions which we cannot be able to answer from the people who were with us on Cyberway. They were focusing on issue that we reflect of inequalities, and a lot of our panelists were basically speaking, pointing out that inequality along the different layers. It's impressive how we were, when it comes to the women issues, how we were going to from the very sophisticated issue that Anna was talking about and Kolinda about equal rights. And then at the same time, talking what Kolinda and Ameenah was referring when it comes to actually having life is an issue in some parts of the world. So it's so dispersed and so variety of the let's say same issues in different parts of the globe. And in that sense, since Kathleen was talking rightly about digital context and machine learning, I hope that we'll become better because machines start learning and creating themselves a knowledge. Because I hope that machines will be learning from better angels of our nature, which today are sometimes not prevailing. So hopefully the machines, if one day machines will take over more and we learn by looking at us, how we function and how we learn, that we will fix ourselves, that we will upgrade ourselves as human beings in being better people and better society, having in mind what we all said. So thank you so much. In 5 minutes, we'll have a break for 5 minutes before the closing session. In that break, I would kindly ask you to go out and to do family photo, I mean, by the people who are here present, and we will send it to the people who are not with us, hoping that they will send us their photos, how they were with us in here. And so we can make one common attempt to be together again, hoping that next time it will be more of us together physically on the same place, not only. So, and as Kolinda said rightly, we should, I agree with Kolinda that this social distance, we have time somehow to change even the wording. We should be socially closer, but physically distant for the time that we are under attack as a people by pandemic. So get socially closer and physically more distance until the time gets changed. So thank you very much, and going out to do a family photo. In 5 minutes, we convene for the closing sessions, right?